Have you ever been so sure about someone that you were completely, wildly wrong? Have you ever judged a person by their shoes, their jacket, or the way they ordered coffee, and then watched your entire world tilt because you realized you judged wrong? What if that single mistake turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to you? She stepped into the tiny, crowded cafe with a flurry of nerves and a list of rules she had promised herself she'd follow. Don't be too eager. Don't talk about money. Keep it casual. Her phone buzzed. He's by the window, wearing a gray cap. She scanned the room and spotted a man in a worn jacket, a simple backpack at his feet, sipping black coffee. He looked ordinary, maybe a little tired. She smiled, approached, and sat. He introduced himself as Noah. Conversation began clumsily and then smoothed. He listened like he had all the time in the world. 15 minutes in, a sleek black SUV pulled up outside. A woman in a designer coat and two suited men entered. They greeted the man by name, Mr. Holloway. Cold water hit her. The man she assumed was a thrift store stranger was the Noah Holloway, billionaire, tech founder, the kind of person who belongs in magazine spreads, not in tiny cafes. Panic and embarrassment set in. She laughed, a high, guilty sound, and watched him slip out to the SUV without explanation. He gave her a small, almost apologetic nod as he left. She sat there, cheeks hot, replaying every small assumption. A week later, an email landed in her inbox with a subject line that made her double-take. Interview opportunity. Holloway Innovations recruiting referenced your recent encounter at the cafe. She thought it a prank, then a coincidence, then something that might actually change everything. The company that dominated headlines wanted to speak to her for a junior communications role. Curiosity had teeth. She went. The interview room was all glass and light, and the kind of minimal modernism that makes you tidy up just by looking at it. She sat across from three people who asked careful, practiced questions about experience and strategy. Then Noah walked in. He wore a simple sweater and jeans, unshowy and direct. He sat down like he belonged there simply because of the work, not because of the headlines. He asked a single question that stopped her. Do you judge people by first impressions? She answered honestly. Who wouldn't? First impressions are a survival tool. But she also told him how a few times in her life being wrong had shifted her perspective. A neighbor she misread who became a friend, a teacher she ignored who changed her trajectory. He listened. When she left, there was an offer for a second interview and a note that read, "We like people who can admit they were wrong." Joining Holloway Innovations felt like stepping into a curious university, messy, brilliant, and always moving. Noah wandered through teams not to micromanage, but to ask what people were trying to solve. He remembered names and small facts, and he measured success in how products worked for the people who used them, not just in quarterly numbers. She discovered his origin story, long nights in a cramped lab, a failed first startup, and a steady obsession with making technology practical for ordinary lives. That humility threaded the company. Her first major assignment was a communications campaign for an affordable health device aimed at rural communities. The team was intentionally diverse. Clinicians who understood the clinic's rhythms, designers who had grown up in small towns, and analysts who knew the numbers. She learned to translate Jamal's blunt field reports into boardroom narratives and to nudge a UX designer toward accessibility over flash. When the test site in Louisiana sent back a video of an elderly woman who could finally check her medication at home, she cried at her desk and then sent the clip to the whole team. Not everything was inspiring. There were long nights, awkward politics, and a persistent whisper campaign about how quickly she was moving up. Rumors about favoritism stung, especially when she had to prove her work with numbers and timelines. She kept a file on her laptop, project proposals, emails, results, evidence that her progress was based on effort and outcomes, not charm. A week of headlines turned ugly when a news outlet alleged Holloway Innovations had outsourced parts of its manufacturing to a factory with poor working conditions. Protesters gathered. Investors demanded an immediate PR fix. Noah did something unexpected. He called for transparency. He formed a task force, asked volunteers to visit the factories in question, and said they would publish what they found. She volunteered. On the ground, they saw worn machines, exhausted workers, and supervisors trying to meet impossible quotas. But they also saw people doing their best under pressure. The problem, the team found, was structural. Long supply chains, auditors who visited only on schedule, and procurement systems that rewarded the cheapest bid. It wasn't a single villain. It was a system that needed fixing. Noah acted. He met with workers in break rooms instead of on camera, hired independent auditors, opened parts of the company's books for review, and established a remediation fund to upgrade equipment and training. Contracts were renegotiated to include enforceable labor standards. They didn't hide or spin. They listened, repaired, and committed to real oversight. Watching him handle the crisis, sitting in a factory canteen, sketching solutions with a floor manager, changed the way she thought about leadership. Public humility, followed by accountability, mattered more than any scripted statement. Her role shifted from shaping messages to shaping policy. She helped draft a factory code of conduct, worked with procurement to translate ethical commitments into enforceable clauses, and debated contract language until the legal team sighed with relief. Those clauses read like small moral engineering, practical, enforceable, and often inconvenient for profit margins. The awards that followed came with letters from community leaders who said the changes made a difference in people's lives. That felt more real than a plaque. The work pulled her closer to Noah by degrees. At a storm-delayed airport, they shared a greasy sandwich and traded failure stories. She learned his humor, the kind that arrives after long stress. And he learned that her stubbornness wasn't arrogance, but a refusal to let good things be undone by the loudest voices in the room. Their friendship grew in the quiet places. Late-night Slack threads about phrasing, a message checking if she'd eaten, a shared plate at a small team dinner where neither of them noticed the cameras because there weren't any. Closeness raised hard questions. Investors bristled at blurred lines between leadership and staff. She insisted on boundaries. "I want my work to stand on its merits," she told Noah, and he respected that. He began advocating for her with data and board meetings, her campaign's reach, the conversion from pilot sites, the testimonials from clinics, so her contributions couldn't be dismissed as the byproduct of proximity. Months later, she took the stage at an industry conference to speak about ethical supply chains. She told the cafe story in one sentence, about how a misread first impression had led to a job that demanded integrity. She told the audience about the elderly woman in Louisiana, the factory mechanic who fixed machines between shifts, the small team that insisted on dignity. People in the crowd came up afterward with questions not about romance, but about how to build systems that cared. Engineers wanted checklists. Small business owners wanted procurement templates. Factory managers asked how to make audits useful instead of punitive. That ripple of questions became a network. She exchanged emails and joined calls with unlikely partners, nonprofits, trade groups, even competitors, helping them adapt the factory code to different contexts. Work that started as a humble communications role became a platform for concrete change. She realized then that the cafe moment had been less about mistaken identity than about what she chose next, to be curious, to stay, and to do the hard work. Their relationship never turned into a glossy fairy tale. They argued about visibility, about how much power one man could wield without silencing others. He learned to step back and make space. She learned to accept help without feeling indebted. They navigated boardroom tension and media curiosity with a shared honesty that made the company stronger rather than weaker. A year after the cafe, at a small community health fair, they stood together handing out devices and answering questions. A child asked shyly how to use the touchscreen. Noah squeezed her hand, off camera, without drama, in a way that felt like gratitude. Not pity, not hero worship. Gratitude for a partner who listened to the long, boring work of getting systems right. What changed her life wasn't the accidental brush with a billionaire. It was the choice she made after that mistake, to be curious instead of ashamed, to admit error, and then put in the work to fix what needed fixing. She learned that admitting you were wrong can be the first honest step toward a better story, and that leadership is quieter and harder than headlines suggest. So what about you? What mistake are you clutching that might be an unopened door? Would you run from the embarrassment or open it? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might be the exact invitation someone else needs. Reply.